Hey guys, it's Amy here, and today I bring you my February wrap-up. So this month I've read slightly less books than last month. I read 10 books last month, and this month I've read 6. But that's because my dissertation was handed in this month, and so I'm pretty chuffed I even managed to read 6. So let's get going. The first book I read this month was Shift by Hugh Howey, and this is the second in the Wool trilogy, which is fantastic, and I have Dust, the third in the series, and I shall be reading that this month. This is a dystopian slash post-apocalyptic series which I'm really enjoying. The basic premise is that the world has come to ruin and people are now living under the ground in giant silos. The first in the series, Wool, introduces the world and the characters in one of the silos. Shift, being the second book, focuses more on how the people ended up in these silos and the people who created them and made the world the way it is, and it is very interesting. This story is really action-packed, and I found the main characters to be really well written and really relatable. And I also think, even though this is a very large book, I got it through it quite quickly because the story was really fast-paced and it jumps between times and people, so it never seemed to get boring because you were always finding out new things about different people and their situations. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I would recommend this to anyone who likes The Hunger Games or any of those dystopian novels and is actually looking for something more adult, because this is an adult-based book and it focuses around people who are a lot older than those kind of typical Hunger Games dystopian books. A fantastic read if this is something you're interested in. So the second book I read this month was The Virgin Suicides by Eugenides. I saw this mentioned by Sana at Books and Quills quite a few times and she said it was amazing, so I thought I would pick it up because the storyline really interested me and it was brilliant. As the title suggests, this book is about suicide and 5 sisters who all commit suicide over the space of a year. We are told the story of these girls through the eyes of the boys who live in the neighbourhood around them. The boys seem to have this obsessive love for the girls and they want to collect and interview anyone who's had any interaction with them or seen anything to do with them, and it is really interesting and told in a really eerily beautiful way. This was a pretty depressing read, but also quite insightful as well. Eugenides definitely has some interesting perspectives on death and why people may commit suicide, and I found that a really interesting thing to think about. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, but I would only recommend if you have a strong interest in things like this. I don't think this book is for everybody, and I definitely wouldn't recommend if you don't like kind of depressing and graphically described deaths, because this book has a few of them and it's not particularly pleasant. The third book I read this month was actually 2 books in one, and it was the Swordhand Omnibus by Sedgwick. This includes My Swordhand is Singing and The Kiss of Death. Both these stories are about vampires, but not quite in the same way as like Twilight would be. The vampires and beastly things in these novels are very much that. They are dangerous and scary and not things that you mess around with. The first of the 2 novels, My Swordhand is Swinging, follows the story of a young boy named Peter and his father Thomas. They are woodcutters and they live outside a town which is being plagued by these vampires. We are told of the struggles that Peter is having with his father and the relationship that they have, and the fact that the secrets his father is hiding is causing a rift between them. A very action-packed vampire novel and different from any other vampire novel I have read. The second book, A Kiss of Death, follows this young boy Marco whose father has gone missing and he goes to Venice to find him. Peter from the first novel is actually in the second one, but he is a lot older and he has been fighting vampires for a very long time and helps Marco in the search for his father. Both these novels were really good and really refreshing and a lot different to a lot of the vampire novels nowadays. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars and I would recommend to anyone who enjoys vampires but maybe not in the typical sense. The fourth book I read in February was Anna and the French Kiss, and I read this over Valentine's Day. I'm not sure I really need to go over this story, but essentially there is a young girl named Anna who is American and she gets sent to Paris to go to school. While she's in school in Paris, she meets a young man named St. Clair whom she begins to fall in love with. Unfortunately, St. Clair already has a girlfriend and Anna is tied up with another boy back in America. This story follows Anna's struggles through the emotional turmoil of being a teenager and the hormones and young love and all the other exciting things that I remember happening when I was a teenager. One thing I really enjoyed about this book was that it was somewhat realistic. She didn't instantly fall in love with him and there were difficulties around them being together. It wasn't just an instant thing, which is something that happens a lot in YA fiction. I'm not the biggest fan of romance, but I found this to be a really good novel and I really really enjoyed it and found that I was wanting to read it all the time, and I got through it quite quickly because I was just really interested in the story and the characters, and I really liked the characters. So I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, and I would recommend to anyone who maybe isn't the biggest fan of romance and doesn't think that they would enjoy it, because I enjoyed it and I didn't think I would. So maybe you will too if you give it a go. The 5th book I read this month was 1984 by George Orwell. This follows the story of a man named Winston Smith who lives in a dystopian world where everything is being controlled and everyone is monitored and watched by a thing called Big Brother. Big Brother is the head of this thing called the party, and the party monitors everyone, and people's children are being trained to report them if they're up to no good or if they're doing things that may be against the agenda of the party. It's a pretty scary landscape and a book that I really enjoyed reading. The world building in this novel is absolutely fantastic, and George Orwell paints a picture that is actually quite terrifying. I didn't really connect to the character of Winston Smith or really enjoy him as a character, but by the end of the novel I found that I was quite sympathetic towards his character. It gets quite horrific and quite graphic by the end. I found that some of the stuff was a bit nasty to read and I didn't really like that bit, but it added to the story and made it what it was. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I would definitely recommend to anyone who enjoys things like The Hunger Games or any dystopian novel really and wants to get into classics, because this was actually a really easy read. The writing was easy to get along with, and I found that I was really pulled in by the story, and it's a really thought-provoking novel, so you should definitely give it a go if you're a bit wary of classics. A very fantastic read. And the final book I read this month was Paper Towns by John Green. This follows the story of a boy named Quentin who gets a visit from his neighbour Margot in the middle of the night. They end up wreaking havoc around the town and taking vengeance on the people that have wronged her. The next day though, when Quentin turns up at school, Margot has gone missing. The rest of the novel focuses around Quentin's search for Margot and the clues that she has left behind for him to find her. I found this to be a really interesting read. I couldn't work out if I really liked it or if I didn't. I found John Green's writing to be really easy to read and get along with, and I found it really funny in parts, but some of the bits I found to just be a little bit strange. I couldn't work out why Quentin was so obsessed with this Margot, even though she hadn't really spoken to him for years, and he quickly became really obsessed and quite rude to any of his friends who didn't want to also search for her. Nonetheless, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I did find some of the motives of the main characters questionable, but I did really enjoy it and I found it really funny in parts. John Green has a brilliant sense of humour and this comes through really well in this book. I wouldn't rate this as much as The Fault in Our Stars, but it is definitely a good read, and if you're looking for more John Green to read then I would suggest this. So those are all the books that I read in February. If you have any comments to make on any of those books, or if you want to share your opinion on them, then please let me know down below. All of these reviews of these books are on my blog and on Goodreads. I shall leave the link down below if you want to befriend me on Goodreads, that would be lovely. Links to Twitter and Instagram will be down there as well. I shall also leave all the links to the books on the Book Depository website if you'd like to go and purchase them. That would be fantastic. So I think that's everything for today, guys. I hope you're all having a brilliant day and I'll see you soon. Bye! My one true pairing would definitely have to be Buffy and Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Favourite show? That would also have to be Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Favourite bands?